Hello, everyone. I thought I would review the last voyage of the Demeter, which I just saw in theaters. And I've actually been going to the theater more often this year than in previous years, mainly because this has been, I think, a slightly better year for film. Not a great year, but it has been, I think, a better one. I mean, it's especially better than last year. In 2022, there really wasn't any film that I recall that I was enticed to see. But this has been, a fairly good year. And I've been going to this one theater, Malco Theaters, close to where I live. It's about an hour away from where I live, and I can get these big, large drinks there. And now look at this thing. Normally I can finish a soda no problem, but this is so big that even I have trouble finishing it. In fact, I didn't finish it completely. And because I am a huge soda fan, especially of Mr. Pibb, Dr. Pepper. I know it isn't good for me, and I don't do it ever. I usually only have like one small can of soda every day. But today I thought I would overindulge while watching the film. So, okay, now let's get to the review. Well, I am a huge fan of gothic horror. It might be my favorite genre. It's definitely within the top five. Usually, my three favorite genres are gothic horror, historical epics, and noir type films, especially crime stories set in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. But I also like gothic horror, horror set in the 19th century. And I'm also a huge fan of Dracula. Now, most of the great Dracula films were made, long before I was born. I mean, even something like Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, which isn't a perfect film, but a pretty good film, which came out in 1992. I didn't see that because it came out before I was born. So to see a new kind of Dracula film in theaters, I definitely wanted to go. And especially because I have been saying for years that they could make an entire movie about the Demeter. And it's very rare that I say Hollywood should make a movie about this and they actually do it. But they did this time, and overall I thought it was a very good film. There are things that I could nitpick, which I'll get to in a minute. But I'll tell you that the positives first. I thought the visuals were very stunning, especially the shots of the sea. This is the kind of film that I think you should see in theaters because the wide shots of the sea were just breathtaking. I really enjoy cinematic shots of the sea, and in fact, the sea, in terms of nature, is probably my favorite thing to write about. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. In some ways, the Demeter kind of has a similar feeling, not just to the Dracula novel, but also to Moby Dick. This idea of a doomed voyage and doing battle at sea. And now, in terms of the acting, I really liked what's his name, the actor that played the captain. I think his name is, I might be pronouncing it wrong, Liam Cunningham or something to that effect. He's actually a really good actor. I saw him in Game of Thrones, and he's an actor that I really enjoy watching on screen. His performance, I felt, was probably the best in the film, and I really liked the dynamic with him and his grandchild. Emotionally, that touched me more than any other part of the film. And there's also the female character of Anna, who I actually found to be somewhat intriguing. She actually probably had the best speeches and dialogue in the film. And one of the things that I really liked about this film is that there are a lot of religious themes and a lot of religious language in this film that I truly appreciate. It's rare in film nowadays that you'll have that, but when you're talking about spiritual forces and good versus evil, I thought it was very appropriate. And I thought that it made sense in this film to make Dracula a primal force that's stalking them rather than a personality. Someone described this film, it's like Alien on a ship, and I think that's a perfectly adequate way of describing it. And now I'll get to some of the negatives now, because the thing that I didn't like about the film overall was I couldn't really relate to the lead character. I didn't really feel emotionally for him. And I also thought that the film at times, not very often, there were a handful of scenes where I thought it got somewhat political in a way that I thought was unnecessary. But again, that didn't ruin the entire film for me. Some people, if they dislike a certain message in a film, they'll say, "Oh, it's just horrible." But if the thing you dislike only takes up 2 or 3 minutes of screen time and you enjoy the rest of the film, then you shouldn't call it a bad film just because of that. But overall, I thought that, the horror was done very well. There was a lot of practical effects, and I thought it was just a really well made film. Of course, the film bombed at the box office, or is bombing at the box office. If there's an upside to that, at least there was hardly anyone in the theater when I saw it. And usually, if a film doesn't do well, there are more seats available, so it's actually a more comfortable experience than if a film is popular. But it's unfortunate that the film failed because, again, I love Gothic horror, and if there was a renaissance, a resurgence in Gothic horror like there was in the late 50s to the early 70s with Hammer horror, I would eat it up. I mean, in fact, I even like Gothic horror when it's bad, even tongue-in-cheek Gothic horror, like Frankenstein Created a Woman, or some of the more extreme, silly things in Dark Shadows, like Parallel Dimensions. Even that I can get into. And now I do think that but the thing is that audiences nowadays just aren't familiar with classic and Gothic literature in general, which is unfortunate. So this film was never going to be highly popular, unfortunately, because people just aren't educated and literate. However, I think the film would have done better, slightly better, if it had been released in October during Halloween season. And also, if the title had been Dracula: The Last Voyage of the Demeter instead of just The Last Voyage, because a lot of people aren't going to know that it's about a ship in the book Dracula. And I also think it might have helped if the film had a known star in the film, because I don't mind casting a big name or a big star in a film if that star, if their persona would be appropriate for that kind of story. So, for example, I don't think you should cast a big star just because, but if you were to, for example, cast a star like Daniel Craig or Ewan McGregor and put them in a period piece, I think they would be right at home. And so I think if the film had a big star, I think it would have done better as well. And so it's unfortunate that it failed. But overall, I thought the film was very good. Now, they had, at the end, they had this thing where it was being set up for a sequel. I think that was probably a mistake, because it probably won't get a sequel, and if it did, it probably wouldn't be book accurate. In fact, I think it's unfortunate that Dracula, with all the film adaptations out there, because Dracula has been adapted probably more than any other book or close to it, they've never actually done a book accurate version of the novel ever. And I think that someone somewhere should do that, because after 100 years of being adapted, Dracula definitely deserves that, because the novel is excellent on its own. And of course, with the Demeter portion, you can take more creative liberties because there's not a lot of detail there. But if they ever did a sequel, then it might get off course, which a lot of Dracula films do. But it would be nice if they made a film that was stuck close to the book. But again, overall, I thought it was a very good film. I would like to see, it's probably a film that I will get on home video and I may watch around Halloween season in the future. And I would definitely like to see more films like it in the future. In fact, I think there's a Nosferatu film coming out next year, and I'm looking forward to that. But overall, I highly enjoyed the film.